"You'll love the new nursing home," my son said, his voice full of excitement. He didn't seem to see the look in my eyes when he said it. Or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, the next day, I disappeared forever. It was supposed to be a visit. Trial. Just a week or two in this wonderful place he'd been raving about for months. He said it was just to help me, that it would give me the peace and care I deserved. But if I'd known then what I know now, I would have fought harder. Let me take you back. Grandma Joy had lived a long, full life, one that many people could only dream of. She had raised children, cared for grandchildren, and loved every moment of it. But now, at 80 years old, her body was starting to remind her that time was catching up. Aches, pains, the forgetfulness. She couldn't deny it any longer. Her son Daniel was a good man, at least that's what she always told herself. He'd always been there for her, at least when it was convenient. But things had changed over the years. His visits had become less frequent, his calls more distant. The busy life of a successful career man had taken precedence over his aging mother. One evening, Daniel arrived at her cozy, modest house, a smile plastered on his face. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, sitting down beside her. Grandma Joy raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind, dear?" "Mom, you've been so strong for so long. But I think it's time." He hesitated. "It's time for you to get some help. You can't do everything by yourself anymore." Her heart sank. She had heard it before. He had mentioned it a few times in passing, but she always dismissed it. She didn't want to be a burden. "Help? I'm fine, Daniel. I don't need anyone looking after me. I can still manage just fine." I know," Daniel replied, his voice softening. "But you don't have to do it alone. There's a wonderful nursing home in the city. So beautiful, Mom. They've got activities, nice rooms, and great food. You'd love it. It'll be so much easier for you, and you can make some new friends. Don't worry about a thing." Grandma Joy looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. But all she saw was what she had been afraid of, the inevitable escape. Cut to Grandma Joy packing her things. The camera slowly zooms in on her worried face. Narrator. Daniel insisted it was the right choice. But as the day approached for her to leave her home of over 40 years, Grandma Joy's heart felt heavy. It wasn't just the house she was leaving behind. It was her independence, her life as she had known it. She tried to hold on to the hope that her son knew what was best for her. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had lived through enough to know when people, especially family, were hiding something. The day came. A bright, sunny morning that felt strangely cold. Daniel helped her pack her bags, putting her things in the trunk of his shiny black car. He was in a rush, like he had somewhere else to be. "Come on, Mom. We're gonna have a blast. I've already checked in for you. You'll love it there. Trust me." She nodded, even though her gut twisted with doubt. Cut to the nursing home exterior, a pristine building too perfect. The camera slowly zooms in, creating a sense of unease. Narrator, whispering tone. The nursing home was exactly as Daniel described it. Shiny, pristine, a picture of tranquility. But the moment Grandma Joy stepped inside, something didn't feel right. The air was too still. People were too quiet. There was no laughter, no warmth. Just silence. Grandma Joy was escorted to her new room, a spacious place with a beautiful view. The windows were large, letting in soft streams of sunlight, but the comfort of the room couldn't make up for the cold feeling in her chest. Her belongings were neatly placed in the closet, and the nurse who escorted her smiled sweetly. "Everything's all set up, Mrs. Joy. If you need anything, just let us know." But Grandma Joy wasn't convinced. As the nurse left, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls. The stillness of the room was almost suffocating. She was surrounded by strangers, people who didn't care about her, who didn't know her. The loneliness crept in, filling the space like a shadow. She was about to stand up when the door opened. Daniel stepped in, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "How's it going, Mom? You look great." But Grandma Joy didn't feel great. She felt trapped. "I don't think I belong here, Daniel." Her voice quivered. "This place, it's not what I thought it was. It feels like a prison." Daniel's smile faltered for just a second before he shrugged it off. "Mom, it's just your nerves. You'll get used to it. Trust me." But Grandma Joy wasn't sure she would. Cut to Grandma Joy lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, her eyes wide open. Music grows tense. Narrator. The days that followed were a blur. Meals were bland, the other residents distant. And as much as she tried to make the best of it, Grandma Joy felt more and more out of place with each passing day. But the most troubling part, the nurses were never around when she needed them. And when they did come, it was always rushed, always cold. Narration slows, building suspense. Narrator whispering. Grandma Joy didn't know it yet, but this place wasn't a home. It was a cage. And what was even more disturbing was the look of satisfaction in Daniel's eyes every time he visited. She started to wonder, was he in on it? Was this all just a game to him? The next day, Grandma Joy would make a discovery. A discovery that would change everything. And it would be the beginning of her journey. A journey to escape, to fight for her freedom. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. I remember the first few days as if they were a fog, heavy and thick, settling around me. I told myself it was just nerves. I told myself I was overthinking things. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. I tried to stay positive, or at least I told myself to. Every time one of the nurses came to check on me, I'd put on my best smile, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was, I could feel the walls closing in. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't in a nursing home at all. I was in a cage. The place looked perfect from the outside. The soft, pastel-colored walls, the shiny floors, the pristine garden outside my window. Seemed like the kind of place you'd see in a brochure. They had everything. Comfortable rooms, activities, meals prepared by a chef, all designed to make you feel like you were living in luxury. It looked so inviting. But the people, the staff, they were cold, distant. Every time I tried to make a friend, someone would tell me to stop talking or remind me that I needed to rest. It was all routine, like a machine. People weren't treated like humans. They were treated like numbers, or worse, like commodities. One evening, as I sat in the common room, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was an elderly woman sitting by the window, staring out into the courtyard. Her eyes were wide, unfocused. She looked like she hadn't spoken in days. I approached her gently, offering a smile. "Hello, dear," I said, my voice soft. She didn't respond. She just kept staring ahead. But something in the way her shoulders hunched, the way her hands shook ever so slightly, made my heart ache. I asked one of the nurses about her. "Oh, don't mind her," the nurse said with a shrug. "She's just a little off. We don't have time for people like her. You'll get used to it." I could feel my blood start to boil. Don't have time for people like her. Thought. She's a person, not a problem. But I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away. Over the next few days I began to notice more things. More residents who were ignored, or worse, mistreated. I saw one nurse snatch a plate away from an old man, who was too slow to finish his meal, and tell him to eat faster next time. I watched another nurse roll her eyes when an elderly woman asked for help with her medication. They didn't care. Not about us, not about our lives. We were just numbers to them. Disposable. But the worst part wasn't what I saw. It was what I didn't see. Where were the activities that Daniel had promised? Where were the group games, the art classes, the yoga sessions? There was nothing like that here. Most of the time, we were left to sit in silence or stare at the walls. No one ever came to check on us unless it was time for a meal or medication. I could tell it was all part of the routine, a carefully calculated system to keep us quiet, to make us feel like we were still alive without actually living. I started asking more questions, trying to find out what was really going on. But every time I did, I was met with a blank stare or a quick change of subject. No one wanted to talk about the staff or the way things really worked behind the scenes. It was all too perfect, too polished. But then, something happened that made it impossible for me to ignore any longer. One evening I was in the dining hall, eating my meal alone. I watched the other residents around me, each of them in their own little world, some barely able to hold their fork. The staff passed by, taking our plates, serving food, but there was no warmth, no kindness in their actions. They were just going through the motions. And that's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, behind a row of curtains, a group of staff members were laughing. They were laughing about us. About how easily we could be controlled, how simple it was to manipulate us. One of the women, a tall nurse with sharp features, was telling a story about an elderly man who had been in the home for months. She was mocking him for being slow to speak, calling him just another brainless old fool. I felt my blood run cold. That was when I realized the truth. This place wasn't just a nursing home. It was a trap. A place where the elderly were forgotten, hidden away, and treated like burdens. The staff didn't care about our well-being. They cared about making money and keeping us quiet. They made sure we felt small, invisible. If they treated us like cattle, we wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. I began to wonder about Daniel. Did he know? Did he choose this place for me because it was convenient for him? Was I just one more thing to check off on his list, one more thing to get out of the way? And if he didn't know, then why hadn't he come to visit me? It had been days since I last saw him. He'd promised he'd be back soon, but the truth was, he had been avoiding me. And I couldn't figure out why. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't wait for him to rescue me. He wasn't coming back. This was my fight now. I had to get out. I had to escape before it was too late. But how? How could I leave a place that seemed so perfect, so secure? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them silence me. I wasn't going to let them win. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I had made a decision. I wasn't going to just sit here and wait. I was going to fight. The next morning, I saw something I hadn't expected. A woman who looked just like me. She was sitting in the corner, holding a piece of paper. Her face was sad, worn out by time, but there was something in her eyes. Oh. I walked over to her asking, "What's that you're holding?" She looked up, startled at first, then handed me the note. "It's for you," she whispered. I looked at the paper, and my heart skipped a beat. It was a letter. Secret message. I can still feel the weight of that letter in my hand, even now. It was like the first glimmer of hope I'd felt since walking through the doors of that place. I knew I had to act fast. But what could I do with so little information? All I had was this cryptic note from a stranger, a woman who looked as lost as I felt. I tucked the letter into my sleeve and walked back to my room, trying to act casual. My mind was racing. Who had left it for me? And why? Had to know more. That night, after the staff had done their rounds and the lights had dimmed, I sat up in bed, carefully unwrapping the note. The handwriting was shaky, almost too hurried, but the message was clear. They are watching. Be careful. There is more to this place than you know. Trust no one except me. Meet me tomorrow by the garden. I'll explain everything. Trust no one. Those words echoed in my mind like a warning. I had learned long ago not to trust too easily, but I had to admit I was desperate. Maybe this was the break I needed. Maybe someone else knew the truth about what was really happening here. The next morning I couldn't get out of my room fast enough. I didn't care about breakfast. I didn't care about the other residents. I just had to get to that garden to find out who had left me that note. When I arrived, there was no one in sight. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for someone to show up. And just when I was about to turn around and leave, I saw her, the woman from the dining room, the one who had handed me the letter. She was sitting on one of the benches, her back hunched, her hands clasped in her lap. I walked toward her slowly, trying not to draw attention. As I approached, she looked up, her eyes filled with both sadness and fear. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. "They're watching us. They're always watching." I sat down next to her, my heart pounding. "Who are they? What's really going on here?" She hesitated before answering. "This place, it's not a home. It's a business that profits from our suffering. They take in the elderly, keep us drugged and quiet, and sell our possessions when we die." My chest tightened. "What? That's impossible." "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's true. I've been here for 5 years, and I've seen it all. The staff are in on it, especially the director, Ms. White. She's the one running the show, pulling the strings behind the scenes. She's the one making all the money." I could feel my hands tremble. "But my son..." I couldn't even say it. Had to ask, "Does Daniel know about this?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I don't know, but I suspect he's part of it." I overheard one of the nurses talking about how the family was involved in the operation. "I don't know what that means, but..." She paused, swallowing hard. "I think your son may be just as much a part of this as they are." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the one I had raised, the one who promised me he'd take care of me. Was he really involved in something so horrific? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want me to do?" The woman's face softened, and for the first time, I saw something other than fear in her eyes. It was compassion. "I want to help you, Joy. I've seen too many people come and go. People who were never the same after they left this place. You're strong. You can get out. You just need to know what's really happening here." I took a deep breath, feeling my resolve harden. I wasn't going to let this place swallow me whole. I wasn't going to let my son or anyone else use me like this. "What can I do?" I asked, looking at her, trying to hold on to the last shred of hope. The woman's eyes flickered with a glint of determination. "There's a plan. But it's dangerous. They'll come after you if they know what you're up to. You have to be smart. The first step is to gather information, find out who you can trust. And when the time comes, we'll escape together. But we need to be ready." The word felt like a lifeline, a promise of something better. Something I hadn't dared to dream of for years. "All right," I said, my voice steady now. "I'll do whatever it takes." The woman nodded, and for a moment we just sat there, quietly watching the garden. The world outside seemed so peaceful, so full of life, but inside these walls, everything was a lie. After a few minutes, she stood up, looking around to make sure no one was watching. "I'll be in touch. But remember, be careful. And trust no one except me." And with that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the garden. Alone with my thoughts, alone with the weight of the truth. Later that day, I began to notice things I hadn't paid attention to before. Little details, things that didn't make sense. The way some residents would disappear for days, only to return pale and weak. The way certain staff members seemed to have no regard for the well-being of the elderly, treating them like cattle instead of human beings. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. I had to find a way out. But there was one thing I hadn't yet figured out. What was Daniel's role in all of this? Was he really involved, or was he just being manipulated? I had to find out. And I had to find out quickly. The next few days were filled with quiet observation. I made it a point to talk to the other residents, to hear their stories. Most of them had been here so long, they didn't even remember the outside world. But some of them still had hope in their eyes. They were the ones I needed to talk to. One evening, as I was walking down the hallway, I bumped into an elderly man who seemed to be in a hurry. He didn't say anything at first, just shuffled past me. But then he stopped and turned around. "Are you all right, dear?" he asked, his voice trembling. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. "You're not the only one who's noticed," he whispered. "If you want to get out, you need to be careful. They'll be watching you." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture was darker than I ever could have imagined. It was clear now that escaping wouldn't be easy. But I wasn't going to let fear stop me. I wasn't going to let them win. The days seemed to blur together after that conversation in the garden. Each morning I woke up with one goal in mind: survive. But more than that, I needed to find a way to get out of here. I couldn't sit idly by and let the horror unfold any longer. I had to take action. I wasn't sure who I could trust, but the old man's words had stuck with me. "They'll be watching you." And I felt it. Everywhere I went, there was someone keeping an eye on me. A nurse passing by a little too closely, a resident who seemed to be whispering behind my back. The walls were closing in, and I didn't know how much time I had left before someone figured out what I was up to. But I had to do something. And soon. That's when I found it. It was a simple thing, almost too easy to find. I was in the common room one afternoon, the same room I'd been spending my days in since I arrived. The other residents were scattered around, some watching the television, some staring out the windows. I was just sitting there pretending to read a book, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the woman who had given me the letter, and how much she seemed to know about the place. She was my only connection to the truth. I needed to get in touch with her again. The idea came to me suddenly: the old desk in the corner. No one ever used it. It was dusty and covered in old magazines. But what if there was something hidden inside? Something no one had noticed before. Without thinking too much, I stood up and walked over to the desk. I quickly ran my fingers over the top, brushing aside the dust, and opened the drawer. At first, all I found was a few stray papers, but then, there it was. Letter. A plain, yellowed envelope, tucked under a stack of old forms. My heart skipped a beat. I pulled it out, my hands shaking slightly as I opened it. The letter was short, but it was all I needed. "I know you're looking for answers. Meet me at the back gate tonight. Don't tell anyone. Don't trust anyone. If we're caught, it's over." My breath caught in my throat. Back gate. It was the one place no one ever went. The staff always took the main entrance, and the residents never had any reason to leave the grounds. The back gate was isolated, and it was my only chance. That night, after the staff had finished their rounds and the lights had dimmed, I slipped out of my room. The silence was deafening, but it gave me a sense of peace. No one was around. No one was watching. I took a deep breath and made my way toward the back of the building. The moon was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard as I crept through the bushes. My heart was pounding in my chest. Every noise, every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Had to stay calm. When I reached the back gate, I saw her. The woman from the garden, standing by the chain-link fence, her face partially hidden in the shadows. "You came," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Good." I walked up to her, my eyes darting around to make sure no one was watching. "What's going on? What do I need to know?" She glanced around quickly, then leaned in closer. "This place, Joy, it's worse than you think. I've seen things they don't want us to know. The director, Ms. White, she's involved in some kind of shady dealings. I don't know all the details, but I've heard enough to know it's not just about the money." She paused, her eyes darkening. "I think they're trafficking us. Not just our possessions, but us. We're being sold off, Joy. Some of us go missing. And no one asks questions." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My whole body went cold. I knew something was wrong, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. "I don't know how deep this goes," she continued, her voice trembling. "But I've seen the files. I've heard the nurses talk. People come and go, and no one ever says a word. There are others like us, people who've been here too long. People who are too weak to fight back." She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. "That's why you need to get out. And I need your help. We can't just run. We need to expose them. We need to show the world what's happening here. If we don't, they'll just keep doing it. They'll keep stealing people's lives." I swallowed hard. The fear inside me was overwhelming, but so was the anger. I wasn't going to let this continue. I wasn't going to let these monsters get away with it. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "What do we do?" She smiled, a small but determined smile. "We gather evidence. Take notes. We find out who the real players are. And when the time is right, we'll go to the authorities. We'll show them everything. But we have to be careful. If we get caught, it's over for both of us." I nodded, my heart racing. I knew what I had to do. I had to expose this place. I had to save myself and the others. The next few days were a blur of quiet planning. The woman, whose name I learned was Margaret, had been here for years. She knew the ins and outs of the facility better than anyone. She showed me how to secretly gather information, how to avoid the staff's watchful eyes, and how to make contact with the outside world without being detected. I didn't sleep much during those days. Every moment felt like a ticking clock, like I was running out of time. But I couldn't stop now. I'd come too far. I spent hours every day taking notes, listening for conversations, and gathering as much information as I could. I even found a way to secretly send messages to a contact outside the facility. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try. But there was one thing that kept me up at night. Daniel. Where was he in all of this? Was he really part of this scheme? Or was he just a pawn too? Had to find out. That night, after another exhausting day of sneaking around, I stood by the window in my room, looking out into the darkness. I could feel the weight of everything bearing down on me. But for the first time in days, I felt like I had a plan. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was a fighter, and I was going to take this place down. The days at the nursing home were becoming harder to endure. Every hour spent in this place felt like a weight on my shoulders, and I could feel the walls closing in on me more with each passing day. But there was no going back now. Margaret and I had made a plan, and it was time to put it into motion. The first part of the plan was simple. Gather as much evidence as possible. We couldn't go to the authorities empty-handed. We needed proof. Real, irrefutable proof that this place was not what it seemed. That it was more than just a home for the elderly. It was a prison. A prison built on the suffering of its residents. I had spent the last few days paying attention, making sure I wasn't seen. I took notes on everything: the way the staff behaved, the strange disappearances of some residents, and the way the director, Ms. White, acted when she thought no one was watching. There were times when I saw her leave the facility with a briefcase, her expression tight and focused. What was she doing? Where was she going? I needed to find out. It was late one night when the opportunity presented itself. I was in the hallway, walking toward the staff room, pretending to look for the bathroom. It was a risky move, but I had to know. I had to know what they were hiding. I couldn't do this alone, but Margaret wasn't available. She had gone to her meeting spot for the night, a place no one ever questioned her. So I was on my own for this one. The staff room was just down the hall, and I knew the night shift nurses would be busy. They always gathered in there for their breaks, gossiping about the residents, talking about things they shouldn't. If I could get close enough, I could hear something that might give me the answers I needed. I took a deep breath, pretending to be casual, and walked down the hallway. The door to the staff room was cracked open, just enough for me to hear muffled voices. I stood outside, pressing my ear against the door. "Did you hear about the latest one?" a nurse asked, her voice low. "No," another nurse replied. "What happened?" "She went missing just like the others. They said it was natural causes, but you and I both know it's not true." My stomach turned. Another missing person. The first nurse laughed, but it was a cold, empty sound. "They're not going to ask questions. The family never does. They just get their money and that's it. We take care of the rest." I could feel the blood drain from my face. They weren't just taking possessions. They were taking lives. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. They were doing this on purpose. "I heard Ms. White is getting ready to move another one out soon," the second nurse said. "Big money for this one. She's got connections with some rich clients." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Big money. Who were these people? And what was their plan? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get away before they saw me. I turned and walked quickly back down the hall, my heart racing. I was shaking, but I kept moving. I couldn't afford to get caught. That night, I met Margaret again, this time in the garden. I couldn't wait to tell her what I had overheard. "This is worse than I thought," I said as soon as I sat down. "They're not just taking people's things. They're taking lives. Ms. White is involved in something much darker than I realized. And she's making money off of it." Margaret looked at me, her expression grim. "I knew it. I've seen it for years. I've seen the residents disappear, and no one says a word. But this is bigger than we thought." I clenched my fists. "I can't just sit here anymore. Have to get out. I have to stop this." Margaret nodded. "I agree. But we can't just run. We need a plan. We need to get the evidence, expose them, and get you out of here before they catch on." We spent the next few days preparing. We knew time was running out. The more we observed, the more we realized how well organized the operation was. The staff were careful. They watched us closely, waiting for any sign of rebellion or suspicion. They'd stop at nothing to keep their secret hidden. I started to take more risks. At night, when the staff were asleep or off duty, I would sneak into the records room, copying whatever I could find. The files were thick, full of names, dates, and strange codes. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed something that tied Ms. White to the operation directly. I had to find her. I had to confront her. The night of the escape was finally upon us. We had everything we needed. The evidence was hidden, ready to be taken. Margaret and I had arranged a way to contact the outside world. But there was one thing I hadn't counted on: Daniel. That morning he came to visit. I hadn't seen him in days, and I wasn't sure what to expect. He looked different, tired, almost guilty. He came in quietly, sitting across from me. "How are you doing, Mom?" he asked, his voice soft. But there was something behind his eyes. Something I couldn't quite place. "I'm doing fine," I said, trying to sound convincing. "I'm adjusting." He didn't say anything for a long while. Finally he leaned forward. "I've been talking to Ms. White. She says you're having a hard time adjusting here. I'm thinking of bringing you home. I don't want you to feel trapped." I felt my heart stop. Trapped. Was that what he thought this place was? Some place I could adjust to? No, this was a prison. And it was time to get out. "I think I'm doing better now," I said, my voice steady. "But there's something I need to tell you, Daniel. Something about this place. It's not what you think." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's not just a nursing home. It's a front. A business that profits off the elderly. They're selling people, Daniel. They're stealing lives." His face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen it. Heard it. I know what's going on. You need to help me, Daniel. You need to help me stop this." For a moment he didn't respond. And then, just as I thought he was going to leave, he stood up. "I'll talk to Ms. White," he said quietly. "I'll see what I can do. But right now I need you to stay calm. Don't make a scene. Please." I didn't know what to think. Was he on their side? Was he really part of this? Or was he just caught up in something bigger than he could control? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't trust him. Not anymore. Time had come. The plan was in motion. It was now or never. The morning after our plan was set, everything felt heavier. The air, the silence, even the sunlight that filtered through the dusty windows of the nursing home felt dimmer. My heart pounded like a clock ticking down to something irreversible. I woke up before dawn just as I always did, but today wasn't like any other day. Today, I wasn't going to sit by the window and watch the world go by. Today, I was going to leave this place, one way or another. Margaret had gone ahead of me. She had to distract the staff at breakfast so I could move freely. She was good at it, pretending to be forgetful, dropping her spoon, calling out for help just loud enough to keep their attention on her. Meanwhile, I slipped down the back corridor, my shawl wrapped tightly around me, my hands shaking from both fear and determination. I had the small folder with me, the one that held copies of everything we had found. Fake death certificates, property transfer forms, medical charts marked with lies. Enough to bury this place forever, if I could just get it into the right hands. The problem was, the right hands were far beyond those locked doors. The back exit was just ahead. A heavy metal door that led to the alley behind the facility. I'd watched the janitor use it dozens of times, and I knew the code by heart. 4135. But as I reached for the keypad, I froze. A step. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Ms. White. She looked just as perfect as ever. Her white blazer crisp, her hair pinned up, her lipstick flawless. But her eyes were cold. Calculating. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Joy?" she asked softly, her tone sharp like a blade hidden behind a smile. I didn't answer. My fingers gripped the folder tighter. She took a step closer. "You've been quite the troublemaker lately. Sneaking around, whispering with Margaret. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" I stayed silent, my throat dry. "I could have been kind," she continued, sighing dramatically. "But you forced my hand." She moved closer, and before I could react, she snatched the folder from my hand. I gasped, reaching out, but she stepped back easily. "Let's see what you've been collecting," she said, flipping through the papers. "Ah, You've been busy. She smiled again, a thin, cruel smile. You think anyone will believe this? A senile old woman's notes. They'll laugh at you, Grandma Joy. Just like your son did. Her words hit harder than I expected. You don't know my son, I whispered. Oh, but I do, she said, leaning in. He signed the papers that brought you here. He sold your house to me. He doesn't want you back. Froze. No. I whispered, my voice breaking. No, he wouldn't. Oh, he did, she said coldly. Your precious Daniel wanted freedom. A life without the burden of his aging mother. And I gave it to him, for a price. Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to scream, to hit her, to tear that folder from her hands. But I couldn't move. My body felt like stone. She looked me over one last time and said quietly, You should have stayed quiet. Now you'll just disappear like the rest. The next thing I remember is darkness. Cold, heavy darkness. I woke up to the sound of rain and the distant hum of tires over gravel. My head was pounding. I was in a van lying on the cold metal floor. My hands were bound with tape. Could barely move. Through the small window, I could see trees rushing past. We were leaving the city. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost all meaning. I thought of Margaret, had they caught her too? And Daniel, was he really part of this? Or was there still a chance he'd find me? Eventually the van stopped. The doors opened and two men pulled me out. I couldn't see their faces, it was dark and rain poured down like needles on my skin. We were in a forest somewhere, far from civilization. They didn't speak. They just dragged me toward a small cabin, its windows boarded up, its door half rotten. Inside, it was empty except for an old chair and a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. They tied me to the chair and left without a word. I sat there for what felt like forever, the sound of rain echoing through the cracks in the roof. I was terrified. But deep inside, something stronger than fear began to rise. Defiance. I wasn't going to end like this. Not in some forgotten place, left to fade away like a shadow. Not me. Not Grandma Joy. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes again, the light was gone. The only thing I could hear was the faint rustle of leaves outside and the chirping of crickets. I could barely feel my hands anymore, but I started working at the tape, twisting, pulling, ignoring the pain. After what felt like an eternity, the tape finally gave way. I stood dizzy but determined. I pushed open the door. The forest was thick and silent, but I could see the faint glow of a road far in the distance. I stumbled toward it, barefoot and shivering. And then, I saw headlights. Car was coming. I waved my arms, screaming, hoping, praying someone would see me. The car stopped. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, umbrella in hand. It was Margaret. Her face broke into tears as she ran toward me. Joy! Oh my God, Joy! I collapsed into her arms. She helped me into the car, her hands shaking as she started the engine. They thought you were gone, she said, crying. But I knew you were still alive. By the time we reached the nearest town, dawn was breaking. The sun rose over the horizon like a promise. A new beginning. But we weren't safe yet. We still had no proof. Ms. White still had everything. And Daniel. I didn't know what to think anymore. Still, one thing was certain. They thought I had disappeared forever. But Grandma Joy was far from finished. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I wasn't in that dark forest cabin anymore. I was lying in a small guest room, wrapped in a warm blanket. The scent of coffee filled the air, and for a brief second, I thought I had dreamed everything. But then the memories flooded back. the van, the cabin, Ms. White's face, and I knew it had all been real. Margaret was sitting beside me, her eyes red and swollen from lack of sleep. She smiled when she saw me awake. "You're safe now," she whispered, handing me a cup of tea. "You're with my niece, Emily. We're in her house. She's a journalist." And blinked. "A journalist?" Margaret nodded. "Yes. She's been trying to expose that place for years. She just never had proof. Until now." I stared down at the cup in my hands. The folder was gone. Ms. White had taken it. Every piece of evidence we'd risked everything to gather was lost. But somehow, a spark of hope still flickered in me. "Even if we don't have the papers," I said softly, "we have the truth. And the truth always finds a way out." Emily entered the room a few minutes later, a determined young woman with sharp eyes and a gentle smile. She looked at me like I was something rare, a survivor. "I've heard your story," she said, sitting beside me. "If half of what you're saying is true, that nursing home isn't just corrupt, it's criminal. And I'm going to help you prove it." Her words were like light breaking through darkness. Over the next few days I told Emily everything. Every whispered threat, every missing resident, every cruel smirk from Ms. White. I described the van, the cabin, the men who took me. I remembered every detail, every voice. Emily recorded it all. She made calls, gathered public records, and reached out to families whose loved ones had passed away at Golden Meadows nursing home. What she found made my blood run cold. Death certificates signed by the same doctor. Property deeds transferred under false names. And large sums of money wired to a company that didn't exist on paper. Margaret was right all along. This wasn't just neglect. It was organized theft, wrapped in fake sympathy. But one name on those papers shattered me more than any other. Daniel Carter. My son's name. Emily hesitated when she showed it to me. "I didn't want to believe it either," she said gently. "But the records show that the sale of your home went directly through Ms. White's company. Daniel signed off as co-owner. That's how she got the property." My hands trembled. He hadn't just sent me away. He'd sold me out. I wanted to deny it, to say it must be a mistake. But deep down I knew. The way he avoided my eyes that last day. The way he said, "You'll love the new nursing home." He wasn't saying it for me. He was saying it for himself. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the world outside. My heart ached, but something else filled me, a sense of purpose. They thought I was gone, but I was still here. And I wasn't going to let them bury what they'd done. The next morning I asked Emily to take me back to Golden Meadows. "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's dangerous." He nodded. "I need to look her in the eyes. I need to see Ms. White one last time." When we arrived, police cars already lined the parking lot. Emily had sent her findings to the authorities, and a warrant had been issued overnight. Officers were leading staff members out in handcuffs. The once perfect white building now looked like what it truly was, a house of lies. I saw her then. Ms. White standing by her car, her perfect composure finally cracking. She spotted me, and for a second her face went pale. "You," she hissed as the officers escorted her toward the van. "You were supposed to be gone." "I was," I said quietly. "But you forgot one thing. I always find my way home." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more as they led her away. Inside the building everything was chaos. Nurses whispered. Residents looked around in confusion. The truth was finally spilling out. Years of silence broken in a single morning. I walked through the halls one last time. The walls that once felt like they were closing in now felt open. The sunlight poured through the windows like freedom itself. As I reached the garden, I saw Margaret waiting there, tears shining in her eyes. "It's over," she said softly. "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's just beginning." That afternoon, news channels across the city ran the story. Elderly woman exposes corrupt nursing home network. Dozens arrested. My face was on every screen. Reporters called me brave, resilient, a survivor. But all I felt was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. And then, just when I thought I'd seen it all, Daniel showed up. He walked up the path toward the house where Emily and I were staying. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream at him. But when he stopped in front of me, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Shame. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know what she was doing." "Swear." "She told me it was all legal. She said you'd be cared for, and I'd be able to save the house. I didn't know she'd hurt people." Tears filled his eyes, and for a moment I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who clung to my hand when he was scared. "You didn't ask, Daniel," I said softly. "You didn't want to know." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." I looked at him for a long time. I didn't forgive him right away. Some wounds take time to heal. But in that moment I knew he meant it. And that was enough. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, I sat in the garden with Margaret and Emily. "I thought I'd lost everything," I said quietly. "My home, my freedom, my family. But maybe I just needed to lose the wrong things to find the right ones again." Margaret smiled. "You found your voice, Joy. That's what matters." And for the first time in a long, long while, I truly believed her. The weeks following the exposé were a whirlwind. The world was starting to take notice of the truth, and my life was no longer a quiet, hidden corner in the world. I had become a symbol, a face for the forgotten, the ones who had suffered in silence for too long. But none of it mattered, not the cameras, not the interviews. What mattered was what I was rebuilding, piece by piece. I wasn't going to be just a story. I was going to be something more. Started with the small things. I sat down every day with Emily, helping her craft her article, organizing the evidence, sending messages to the families of the other residents who had suffered. Together, we made sure the truth reached every corner of the world. But while the public knew my story, the healing had to start within. Margaret stayed by my side through every step of it. She became more than a friend. She became my family. Her strength, her compassion, her unwavering belief in justice. I hadn't realized how much I needed that kind of love until she was there, every day, reminding me that I wasn't alone. But what truly healed me, what gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't known I'd lost, was helping the other residents. Many of them had lost their families, their homes, and their voices. Now they needed someone to fight for them. I started visiting other nursing homes, talking to families, and offering what little wisdom I could. I wasn't going to let any other elderly person suffer the way I had. I was going to make sure they were heard, even if it meant putting my own life on the line. One afternoon, after a long day of speaking with a family who had lost their mother under mysterious circumstances at another facility, I returned to Emily's house. Daniel was sitting on the porch, his head down, his hands clasped together. I hadn't seen much of him since that day. I'd needed space, and he had respected that. But today something was different. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mom," he said as I stepped up to the porch. His voice was low, heavy. "But I wanted to say, sorry. For everything. For putting you in that place. For not seeing what was happening. I don't know if I can fix what I've done, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying." I stood there, looking at him for a long while. He wasn't the same man who'd brought me to that horrible place. He was broken. Regret and pain were written all over his face, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my son as a human being, someone who had made a terrible mistake but was trying to make it right. You don't need to fix it, I said quietly. But you need to make sure it never happens again. And that starts with being honest with yourself. I don't know if I can ever forgive you fully. Not yet. But I want to see you do better. Not just for me, but for everyone you hurt. He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. I will. I swear. And in that moment I felt something shift. Something that I hadn't felt since I was taken from my home. A glimmer of peace. As the months passed, I slowly made my way back to the life I had once known. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. But I learned that trust is something that must be earned slowly over time. I moved into a small apartment, not far from Emily's house. I didn't want to be alone. Not yet. There was still too much healing to be done. But the place felt like mine. It wasn't a nursing home. It wasn't a prison. It was a home. I spent my mornings volunteering at local shelters, my afternoons organizing support groups for families who had lost loved ones to corrupt institutions. And in the evenings I would sit by the window watching the sun set, knowing that for the first time in years, I was living my life on my own terms. One day Emily came by with news. She'd secured a publishing deal for the book about what had happened at Golden Meadows. It was going to be bigger than anything we'd expected. A real, published account of what I'd endured, and how my fight for justice had changed everything. The book would be called Never Forgotten, The Fight for Truth at Golden Meadows. My story, my voice, and my journey. The message was clear. No one is ever truly forgotten. No one is ever too old, too invisible to be heard. I stared at the manuscript she handed me, the words swirling on the page, and for the first time, I saw myself as more than a victim. I saw myself as a survivor. I saw myself as a warrior. Daniel had come to visit a few times over the months. We were working on rebuilding our relationship step by step. I didn't expect it to be easy, and it wasn't. But every time he sat with me we talked, and we slowly moved toward a new understanding. I didn't know where it would lead, but I was no longer afraid to find out. One day, as we were sitting together on the porch, Daniel turned to me with a tentative smile. "Mom," he said, "I know this may sound crazy, but do you think there's a chance I could move in with you? Not just to help, but to actually live with you. I want to be a part of your life again. I don't want to be the man who abandoned you." I thought about it for a long moment. It was a big step, a leap of faith I hadn't been sure I was ready for. But then I realized, just as I had fought to find my voice, I had to fight to open my heart again. And maybe that meant giving him a chance. "I think that's a good idea," I said, my voice soft but steady. "But we'll take it slow. We have to rebuild trust together." As the seasons changed, so did my life. It wasn't the life I had once imagined, but it was a life that was mine, full of new beginnings, second chances, and healing. Golden Meadows was no longer a prison in my mind. It was just a chapter of my story, a chapter one had learned from, and one that had led me to this new beginning. And every time I looked out that window, I saw not just the setting sun, but a new horizon, full of hope, full of possibility. I had been forgotten once, but I would never be forgotten again. And I was going to make sure no one else ever had to be.